think with the heart set, we're talking specifically about violence, but I can't speak for anybody but myself, but I'm pretty desensitized to all the crap going on in the world, because it bombards us every day to the point where you're like, who cares, whatever, it doesn't matter anymore. But
Right.
it does. And we not, and that's why God says, guard your heart with all diligence, because from it come all the issues of your life. And if you're not guarding it, and then you become numb to, the homeless guy down the street, or to the kids doing their eats, whatever, the heart set, I think I've never thought of it that way. That is a very, 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 very important aspect of our lives as Christian men, to protect our hearts and our heart set, and what is our heart set to.
And I think it has to be set towards relationship and towards love and towards grace, because one of the things God has given to men is the ability to compartmentalize. My wife and I can argue, I can walk out the door, shut it, and I'm in my business mindset, right? I mean, I've got to go to work. I can't just linger on the conflict. And I set that stuff aside and I go home, I go to work. I have conflict at work. What do I do when I walk out? I compartmentalize it. I go home because I can't take that stuff home. So we have the ability to compartmentalize, and that's a gift. But it's also a curse when we start locking doors that we can't unlock anymore. And when we surrender to that, because it's easier for me to compartmentalize than it is for me to be a true human man and live and love in a way that God wants us to. And I think one of the things that kind of captures that, I love this quote from C.S. Lewis from Four Loves. But he says this: to love at all is to be vulnerable. And isn't that our greatest fear? I mean, we are terrified of being vulnerable. And but to love anything, and your heart will be wronged and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, and irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. And I think that the courage that men have to have and the character that we have to grow up is our capacity to bear the wounds of loving other people and not shrink back into the compartments of our lives that God has given us as a gift of grace to protect ourselves in bad moments. When those bad moments and that compartmentalization becomes a regular part of everyday life, is dangerous. And I think that's one reason it's so hard for men to come back from war, and they don't know how to open that back up. They've compartmentalized all that because their friends were killed and bad things happened, and they had to shut all those things down. How do you become human again in the sense of transparent and vulnerable and loving and not overflowing with anger? Because if you take out love, what's left? We're angry because we want to be able to be loved, and we want to love other people. And when we don't have that capacity, our response to that is to be angry because it's not right, and we know that it's not right. And so that's our, it's amazing to me. My wife sent me a little video. I wish I played it for you. It's hilarious. But this husband and wife were laying next to each other in bed, and you could see, all you saw was his hand. He came out and touched her on the back, and she said, "No, not tonight. I've been working all day." And so Tuesday night came up. He touched her on the back, rubbed her on the back. She said, "No, not today. I'm on my period." And then he touched her on Wednesday, and she said, "No, I've been washing clothes all day, and not tonight." So he touches her on Thursday, and she says, he started rubbing on her pants, and she's like, "Those are my pants, leave them alone. You can't touch me," basically. And then she says, "Are you pouting?" And like, seriously, you're pouting? And I was kind of like, haha, but I'm like, man, that would be where you feel rejected, and you feel like, because this is the most important thing, the most intimate thing, the most transparent thing you can do, and you feel rejected in that moment. There's a part of us that hardens up, right? I mean, you kind of close up and you draw back, and you're like, there's a part of you that, because you go from offering yourself, literally offering yourself, and maybe not a good time for your wife, but you're still offering yourself. I want you and I care about you, and then to be rejected at that moment of intimacy, we shut down.
It turned into another compartment a lot.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes. And so we have to learn to survive. And we don't do a good job of that because we turn it off, but we never turn it back on. After a while, we turn it off so many times that we never turn on that intimacy again, which creates a cycle of her not feeling intimate and not feeling as though she's rejecting us more, and then we're feeling justified and being angry, and we're feeling justified and our eyes wandering and our hearts wandering, and we feel justified, but it's all because we've shut things off and never turned them back on, and that's not fair for her or the kids. Because there's a part of us that we don't bring our whole self to the table anymore. We don't bring all of our madness to the table anymore and truly offer ourselves transparently and vulnerably and innocently, because we're afraid if I do offer it that way, if I'm that far out there and she says no, what's going to happen? How am I going to feel? I feel stupid, or I feel insecure, or I feel like I'm not important, right? I mean, those are things that we've all, I think, struggled with in the past. So, you know, it goes back to being this idea too of being a servant. Christ calls us to be a servant, and I know I've seen this in my heart, but haven't we often thought, you know, I want to be a servant, but you dang well better not treat me like one. So it's important for us to be a servant in nature, not a servant in practice. If I'm a servant in nature, if somebody treats me like a servant, then that's what I expect. It's no big deal. I'm a servant, right? But our hearts never really buy into the reality of what it means to be a servant of Christ. I'm not doing this because of what I get in return. I'm doing this because at the end of the day, I want to kneel down before my Father in heaven and say, Father, today I lived as a servant. Are you pleased? It wasn't because my wife treated me the way she's supposed to. It's not because a prisoner treated me the way he was supposed to. It's not because my boss treated me the way they were supposed to. And they acknowledged my servanthood and treated me like a king because I was a servant. Because that's really what we want, isn't it? I want people to treat me like a king because I live like a servant. And if they don't treat me with that kind of respect, then I get to be bitter and I get to say I'm not going to be a servant anymore because it doesn't really work. God doesn't ask us to be a servant because it works. He asks us to be a servant because it's like Him. And at the end of the day, I've got to kneel down and offer to Him. Even if the whole world has rejected my servanthood, I've got to look to Him and say, Father, were you pleased today by how I served others on your behalf? And that's a very different approach to reality. And I think that we've got to take that same kind of mindset with violence. I don't have the freedom. The act of violence is truly an act of servanthood. Because I'm not being violent because it satisfies me or makes me happy or makes me feel safe. I'm being violent on behalf of other people in a way that honors God. And so if I'm in a military group and we're going out to be violent because there are people who are trying to kill other innocent people, or I've got to do that on behalf of the nation I live in, I don't get to be free with my violence and do anything I want to do. Because at the end of the day, I have to offer my violence to God for His pleasure, the same way I have to offer my servanthood to Him for His pleasure. So we have to be careful with how we express that violence so we don't defile that relationship with Christ. And as we offer it to Him, there should be nothing that we're ashamed of that we've done. Does that make sense? And so I think it's important that we really struggle through what does that look like and what does that mean. But if I can't do that kind of offering over servanthood, I'm going to be completely incapable of doing it when it comes to acts of violence. If I can't do it on how I love my wife when she's unlovable, or how I love my kids when they're unlovable, or how I love my employees when they're unlovable, or my friends when they're unlovable, if I can't go back to God and say, Father, were you pleased with the life I live today? I served other people on your behalf. I was a servant for you. And they treated me like a servant, and I embraced it. And Father, I offer that to you. Are you pleased? Because if it is a relationship, then we should get something back from Him, which makes me pleased at His pleasure. And if I'm not getting that back, I'm empty because the world has pulled things out of me. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go fill that with something that's not healthy. And this is the same way with violence. Violence does things to us. We're not fully equipped to bear the weight. That's one reason God says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Why? Because only God can bear the full weight of vengeance without it changing His nature. Violence and vengeance especially, a vengeful heart, changes us and affects us. And we can't bear that weight without His help. What are you guys thinking?
makes sense to me. I think it's good that we can't bear that on our own because it requires our relationship with God to repair the damage or to restore the sense of relationship and intimacy we're supposed to have. I think that the dependence on Him is necessary. I think that He gave us the ability to fully bear the things He asks us to do, then I don't think that bears that relationship. It's like when the Israelites had to go out and take the life commandment over the children. Without the love of God to throw that upon, we could have messed them up too.
Yeah, and I think that what trains us to be able to handle violence is learning to serve. Because it conditions our heart to whom we're pleasing. And if we don't condition our hearts every single day to please the Father as we serve other people who are ungrateful, and do that with a clean heart, how can we bear the additional burden of violence? And so I think that as a Christian nation, we're ill-equipped to be a violent nation in a way that honors God and defending the innocent, standing against Islam, and standing against those things that are literally destroying the world because we are terrible at serving our families. And so we're not equipped really to do either one of them very well. And because of that, we're going to be disobedient. We're going to allow the world to influence us to be violent the way they're violent, instead of being violent in the way that God's violent. And them saying, that's very different than the way we do it. Why do you do it that way? All right, so mindset, 4 loves. And I kind of touched on this earlier, but the last days of judgment are a violent act. God's pouring His vengeance out upon the world, and that's clear in Revelation. And vengeance is a violent act. Justice is a violent act. You can't have justice without having violence. And so in Christianity, we have so little conception of how to manage violence that we want to get rid of any kind of punishment, any kind of judgment, any kind of making people pay for the sins against the culture that they've committed. And so therefore the sins grow because there's nothing stopping it. There's no goodness keeping evil from being successful. And so, again, never forget that although violence is the only thing that can contain evil men, love is the only thing that can change them. And so we've got to carry that capacity for violence, but also that capacity to love, because our desire is not to destroy men, but to be a vehicle for change for them. And it's up to them on how far we have to go to be able to have that conversation about love. Another example, I think, is hell. Hell is, I'm not going to hell peacefully, right? So if God condemns me to hell, He's going to have some kind of violence in order to do that. He's got to violently put people there because nobody's going to hell willingly, right? So, but I think hell is actually a gift of love. That sounds kind of counterintuitive. But when you think about Hitler and you think about Palmat, and you think about all the men in the world who've tormented and tortured and destroyed whole generations of people for their own satisfaction, political satisfaction, or we look at serial killers and serial rapists and people who just for pleasure have tormented and tortured and abused people serially over and over and over again. What happens if God takes all those people, because even heaven would be hell for a man who didn't want to be there. Even heaven would be hell for a man who didn't want to be there. So if a man doesn't want to be in heaven, what's God going to do with him? He's created a place called hell because He's not going to force people to live in the Trinity and live like Him. What's He going to do with all these people that have been serially abusing people? Is He going to condemn people to live with those abusers for eternity? No. Out of love, He says, I need to isolate you to protect you, because you don't want to live with me, and so I've got to put you somewhere, and so I'm going to make you alone. And so I think hell was created out of love, even for those who were rebels. And He did that to protect them, because evil can't live in the midst of goodness or would destroy it, right? I mean, His nature is so good that He would destroy any evil. And so He says, I have to put you here to protect you. And this idea of aloneness is terrible. But even that He does out of love. And so, this idea of vengeance, what's the difference between vengeance and justice? Is there a difference? Because God says vengeance is His, but He asks us to be just. So what's the difference?
Is there vengeance without love? Yes.
Is there vengeance without love? What do you think?
There's no reason.
That's true.
Vengeance would be the exacting of the price or whatever that justice requires. Justice is the standard. Vengeance is the action that enforces that standard.
Okay, so what's vengeance?
It could be your interpretation of justice.
It's you deciding.
Yes.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
you deciding to exact judgment on someone. If God told you to do the same thing that you had in your heart, then that would be justice, because that's what God wanted. But if God wanted someone to live eternity separated, and you go and kill him, and you're not doing what God wanted, and that's vengeance.
Okay, so vengeance.
Self-serving justice.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
so we could say that vengeance is self-charging justice. So if I'm vengeful, then I'm going to say, regardless of the law, regardless of what culture says, regardless of what a jury says, regardless of what anybody else says, I'm going to satisfy my desire for justice.
Exactly right.
So I'm gonna please me, regardless of what anybody else wants. So we can see why God would say, I'm the only one who can do that. Because I'm the only one, when I do that, I'm right when I do that. I can say what the law is wrong about. I can say what people are wrong about. I'm the only one who can say what is right and wrong without a doubt. So I reserve vengeance as my ability to exact justice, because I'm the only one who can make that determination. Would that be fair? What were you going to say? Oh, I thought you had it coming. Okay. So, but justice is carrying out something that's right, and something that's the law. So I could, as one man, decide to go do justice, but what am I doing? What is justice? It's stopping evil men from doing more evil acts. So I would be going out to really protect other people, not to make people pay for what they've already done as much as to stop them from doing more of it.
So basically, vengeance is taking several people or the Lord out of the equation and just enacting immediately.
Yes,
Rather than waiting for the
or even if I waited and did that,
justice or
yes,
spiritual realm to say this is what needs to be done. I've already done it. It's done.
So for us though, because God is just and we're screwed up, taking vengeance instead of letting God do it, we can act from the pure justice, which God does. So any act of vengeance on our part would never be a truly just act at all, which is kind of what you were saying a minute ago. But I was thinking, when's the last time that you really heard anybody cry for justice? We don't. Especially in our country, we cry for fairness. And fairness and justice are not the same thing. Fairness actually doesn't even exist. It's an imaginary state that has to be enforced by somebody.
yeah. What's fair is not equal. What is equal is not fair.
We don't do justice. We have vengeance. We have BLM without trying to say anything. It's people reacting to a situation immediately without letting a judicial system
And
deal with the
I
problem,
think
which would be your justice, which would be letting everything play out and having, or we have people, it was just a situation that grabbed me, but that's
yeah.
kind of like what you're saying,
They want the situation to be fair, not just. Because if we actually got what was just, it'd be a whole different outcome than what fair is.
Well, and justice has the intention of making things right.
Yes.
well, I was telling my dad the other day, this is
this
completely,
justice seems to
So you're saying
it sounds like, I guess, in a simplistic format, justice is upholding the law, whereas vengeance is taking away the
Yeah, it's satisfying you rather than satisfying the law. And when we say that, we're assuming the law reflects what is good and right and fair and moral.
And
Not
one
only-
can go hand in hand with the other and be
Yeah.
correct. But when it's taken out of context or it's taken too soon, then it's vengeance.
Since God created the
When,
law,
I was talking on Father the other day,
Yes,
we were talking
exactly.
about, when Barack Obama scolded the Supreme Court, prior to the, was it either the Defensive Act, Marriage Act, or the reviewing of Obamacare, I don't remember.
Both,
which
he
one.
did both. He did both
You
times.
know, and basically said, you know, if you are who you say you are, you're gonna rule the way I want you to. And, you know, I was saying, if I was a Supreme Court justice, I would have said, I'm going to rule exactly opposite the way you just because you said that. And I said, well, that's probably why I'm not a Supreme Court justice.
Right.
Because I would love to exact my vengeance instead of doing what is right according to the law.
Yeah, and I think that's an inclination for most of us too, I think, to react that way. I also think that justice is something that sets things right with society as much as possible. It's not so much as punishing somebody, but it's making society right. So if I've got a guy who's committed murder, then I've got to make sure he doesn't murder anymore, and I've got to make sure society's safe, and so I've got to exact justice on this guy in order to protect society. Or if he's abused a child, to make it right for that child and that family where they feel safe and they feel. Vengeance says, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to make you pay for what you did. So that vengeful heart is about punishment, not about making things right.
I think vengeance is more of immediate information. Justice is more of combined information.
Yes, I think that's fair too. It's taking not just my needs into account, but other people's needs too. What are society's needs? What is the victim's
Right.
needs? It's taking into account the whole picture. And vengeance says, I don't care what the whole picture says, I'm going to do this.
You said vengeance being towards punishment, and I went through a very, at my core, change with me and my kids about punishment. Because I came to the realization that punishment was, you're paying a freaking price for what you did. But that's where it stopped. There was no after that said, I've got to teach you to do right or set it right or whatever. And discipline is, yeah, there's consequences and they may not be comfortable, but you're going to learn the proper way, the right way, the just way to do things. And so the end goal of discipline or justice is on the other side of the pavement, there's a good outcome, something over there. Vengeance and punishment is just like, you gotta have some pain for this.
So-
and that's the end goal is the pain of the person who did whatever.
Yeah, so I see justice as, like if I'm disciplining my child, why am I doing that? Because I want to train him in a better way to live. And so justice should be training an individual that what they did was wrong and helping them learn a different way to live. And it's also not just for the individual, it's for society to say what he did is wrong, and as a society, we can't endorse that. And so we're training society on what's right and wrong as well. So justice is, I'm fine, thank you. Justice is training society and the individual in what's right and wrong. And sometimes a person has to pay the capital price to demonstrate to society that that was so wrong, we cannot approve it. And this person has forfeited their life as a result of that, because we cannot allow him to live, or else it diminishes us as a society, because that was such a violent act. Vengeance is pure punishment. And God's only going to purely punish at the judgment. Right? God's only going to make those determinations. And so I think in our hearts, that's a part of our growing our character up, where we sort through those motivations in our heart. Am I out to make a person pay a price and exact vengeance, or am I trying to do the right thing? Am I trying to protect society from them? Am I trying to protect my daughter? Or am I merely trying to make a person pay that price? And so, especially when we're making eternal decisions about somebody else's life, that's a lot of weight to bear. So there should be no satisfaction in the sense of pleasure. I'm pleased, I'm having pleasure at making this person suffer because of what they did. When we have joy in other people's suffering, there's something wrong with us. Even if it's right for them to suffer. I forgot who said this quote, but basically they said, to love somebody else as we love ourselves, which is a command of God, then we should love the sinner as we love ourselves when we sin, which is to say that we're ultimately disappointed that as good as a person as I want to be, I did something like that. I'm disappointed. Part of my shame is I'm disappointed because I want better for me than what I did. And if we love another person the way we love ourselves, then we should be disappointed that they did something like that when they could have been living so much better. So our anger is not at them, it's that their life has been diminished. That they're less of a person now, and they have less capacity in society now because of what they've done. Right? If I'm a criminal and I've been labeled a criminal, I'm disappointed because of what it means to me. Because now I can't live out my fullest. And that disappointment, if I love my neighbor as I love myself, then I have to have that kind of disappointment for criminals around me. Boy, that's tough. That's really tough.
Disassociation comes into it, which I'm sure that we all struggle with, disassociating ourselves from those kind of people.
And the irony is when we disassociate ourselves from those kind of people, we're actually disassociating from ourselves. Because we were built for community, we were built for love, and we were built for loving a person who has sinned and now they have a diminished life. And we're designed by God's nature, because it's His nature, to love that kind of person. And when we don't have the ability or willingness to do that, we actually have to shrink ourselves down to live less than God designed us to. So we lose and we suffer when we find pleasure in other people's suffering.